Hi, my name is Corey Reeser, and along with Laura Banks, we will be presenting an overview and analysis of the American foster care system, along with some of the educational challenges that are presented by students who are in the foster care system in the United States. So before we get into the presentation itself, I want to provide a brief overview of the agenda for the presentation. I, Corey Reeser, will be providing the definition of foster care, an overview of the American foster care system, along with application of theory for foster care and some of the cognitive developmental processes that were discussed in this course. Laura will be providing an overview of foster students in education. She will provide classroom strategies specifically for foster youth and ways in which teachers can help students in the foster care system kind of navigate the academic system in order to succeed. And she will also be describing possible assignments to avoid in terms of students in the foster care system, along with a conclusion wrapping up our assessment of the foster care system and educational challenges that are presented by students in the foster care system itself. So first off, the definition of foster care: it's a 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians and for whom the state agency has placement and care responsibility. This includes, but is also not limited to, placements in foster family homes, foster homes of relatives, group homes, emergency shelters, residential facilities, child care institutions, and pre-adoptive homes. Federal definition of foster care and related terms. So that's where this actual definition comes from. And it's important to basically distinguish foster care from adoption. So basically, if you have a student who's been adopted, the individuals in which they're adoptive parents, the individuals whom they live with, they are living with them on a permanent basis, and paperwork has been filed to where they are actually considered their adoptive parents. Whereas foster care, children who are in the foster care system tend to bounce from home to home, and the tendency of foster care, it's not a stable environment for the child. It's basically the precursor to moving into adoption if the child becomes lucky enough to move into an adopted home. So you can imagine, especially when you're dealing with children who have stayed extensively in emergency shelters or residential facilities, the types of challenges that could present themselves within the classroom because of the experiences of these children outside of the educational environment. So foster care in America, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 2014, there were over 4,115 children in the foster care system. Now, the little picture that we provided on the right kind of gives a brief overview of the statistics for children in the foster care system and the probability of their success, along with the situations that they encounter within the foster care system itself. So if you can see some of the statistics, 71% of young women in the foster care system will be pregnant by 21. 1 in 4 will experience PTSD, which is an extremely high number, along with half will be employed by age 24. So these are pretty scary numbers when you're looking at the overall compass of the foster care system and the probability that children in the foster care system will actually receive the appropriate care and nurturement that they deserve in order to succeed socially and in academics as well. So foster care and behaviorist theory. So I wanted to discuss the behaviorist theory in terms of the cognitive development of children in the foster care system. So the behaviorist theory defined is a psychological approach to understanding human behavior. Behaviorism asserts that all human behaviors are reflexes produced by external stimuli from the surrounding environment or a consequence of the individual's history. You have classical conditioning, which is reflexive behavior, so a foster child's experiences in the foster care system, and operant conditioning, which is the reward and punishment model, which is inconsistent for children in the foster care system. So when you're dealing with the behaviorist theory, and especially the PTSD element of the foster care system, with 1 in 4 children likely experiencing PTSD at some point in their life, it's important to understand as a teacher the development and cognitive development of these students. So when you're looking at a student in foster care, for example, the classical conditioning model or the child's experiences are far more mature and far above their age category as opposed to their fellow peers. So if you see a foster student, they may have seen and experienced things that many adults may not experience till later on in their lives. So their understanding and cognitive development in terms of possibly reading certain situations would be far superior to their fellow peers. Same thing with operant conditioning, which is the reward and punishment model. This may be problematic for children in foster care because of the inconsistencies they experience moving from home to home. So one home may have a certain guidelines for reward and punishment, while another home may favor or view certain behaviors in another way. So this is important for a teacher to understand and comprehend, because foster care students may not respond as well to operant conditioning models. So by having this understanding and this comprehension of this very brief overview of the behaviorist theory, a teacher can formulate strategies later on that kind of, in a sense, mitigate many of the challenges that are present with many of the experiences that the students have, or the students in foster care system have experienced in terms of behaviorism itself. The next is constructivism. Constructivism, defined, is a theory that describes how people learn. The theory asserts that people construct their own knowledge and understanding of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. Now, when you're linking constructivism to foster care, especially students in high school, because I myself am going for my social studies credential in high school, it's important to understand that foster care students develop certain understandings of certain situations differently because they were forced, as we described in the behaviorist section, that they are forced to learn and experience things at a very young age that society would probably not dictate as appropriate. So as a teacher, it's important to understand that when a foster care student sits down in my social studies class and I'm communicating information and requiring them to do certain tasks, that the student may not respond well to a certain task or a certain learning scenario because they have a previous history or a previous negative history, and then they built their knowledge based off of that negative history. So one very simple example would be a female student who's in the foster care system having problems with a male teacher because, she had former PTSD experiences with a male foster care parent. So that's something that would need to be understood by the teacher in order to overcome that challenge. So foster care and constructivism. How the foster care system compromised constructivist development in children. That was pretty much previously discussed in the behaviorist section, although it's important to note that by having children, basically bounce around from environment to environment and not have a steady basis to gauge their own cognitive development, they're forced to basically go in this inconsistent mode of basically developing different personalities for different foster homes. Basically, the child is forced to adapt, their own behaviors in reference to whatever environment they are currently living in, and that's extremely dampering, or I guess hard on the brain, if you will, because and it's very exhausting for those students as well, because they're constantly putting forth that much effort to adapt to their new environment. That goes into the inconsistent platform of behavioral expectations, which is important for a teacher to understand, because these students don't necessarily have the background of their peers who were in one stable environment and grew up with one stable set of expectations as they moved through their developmental processes. And this moves into the experiences and reflections portion of the child's age, because as the student who is in the foster care system is forced to experience and then reflect on situations that are far above their age range, this basically creates, it can create a lot of depression and disengagement with the content material, because the student isn't really, academics aren't really the priority. The priority is basically dealing with all of the situations and scenarios that could be seen in a negative light in terms of their stay within the foster care system itself. So moving on into foster students in education, Laura will be describing foster students in education and the rest of the presentation from this point forward.